Awesome. Hi, everyone who's joining. Thank you for joining us. We're just waiting to get everybody in, and then we will be going on Facebook Live, which is taking a bit of a second, and we'll start very soon in just a few minutes or seconds. Depends on what Kim decides. Minutes, seconds, hours.
I wonder how long can you just sit in silence in front of a camera?
The code here is in front of a camera, yeah. Normally I can sit for a while without talking, but if there is a camera, it'll be hard. I mean, you're supposed to talk in front of a camera, come on.
But you know that YouTube has these videos that you can put on, like when you're inviting friends over, so you can just put a fireplace on. So there's also people that just sit there and drink whiskey for like 3 hours. That's it on YouTube.
I don't mind it. Well, if you're talking with the drinking, then maybe I can do that. That's fine. Now I don't have the drinking, so I have to stick to the talking. Poor people. All right. So I think.
Okay, let's get started. Yeah, let's get started. Hi, shalom everyone, and welcome, and thank you for joining us again on our live stream, Crossing Borders. Together with me, I'm Kim. Together with me is Aziz, one of our amazing co-founders at Majdi Tours, and today with us we have Kelley Louise from Impact Travel Alliance. I was trying so hard to say that again and again in my head that, of course, I start with the second word. Hi, Kelley. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me. And people switch it all the time. Don't worry about it.
So tell us a bit about yourself and how you became a travel entrepreneur. What even brought you to travel? Actually, the most interesting thing that I would like to ask you is, where's the first place you traveled to?
The first place I traveled to, I don't know that I even know the answer to that. My parents were avid travelers, so I've been traveling since before I can remember. Some of my earliest childhood memories are visiting the Grand Canyon. I also grew up in Galveston, which is an island in like the very southern part of Texas, and probably my earliest memory is taking a trip to mainland Texas. And in my mind, I knew that I lived in Texas, but I thought that I was visiting this magical island somewhere else. So I had it flipped around in my head. But so many of my favorite childhood memories are rooted in travel.
That's funny. So how did you get to where you are today?
I have been in the travel industry pretty much since I graduated from college. My background is originally in journalism, and I had an opportunity to actually travel abroad and do this project with a sustainable tourism company in Uganda. And that trip really opened my eyes to how you can have a positive impact on a destination through things like guerrilla trekking or a cooking class, or just really working to connect with that culture in an immersive way, and being mindful of how you're spending your money. There's all of these really cool opportunities that come from that for both you as the traveler as well as the destination that you're visiting. And it kind of planted a seed in my mind about the potential of travel. And as I kept digging into that and progressing along in my career, a lot of what I was hearing within the industry was rooted in, if you want to do good when you travel, you should be volunteering. And I just saw a little bit of a disconnect there. I'm like, why can't you just go on a vacation and also have a positive impact? So it's everything that I've done as an entrepreneur is rooted in my passion for storytelling, as well as searching for the best story and just thinking beyond what the status quo for sustainability looks like within the industry.
So you're talking about storytelling, and I agree with you that storytelling is probably the most interesting thing when we talk about travel. To me, it's less about what we see and more about what we experience and what stories we leave with. And I'm wondering if there is a story that kind of from your maybe early travels that really impacted you, that always sticks with you, that this is the story that has really, I just can never forget.
It's so hard to pick one. I guess one that comes to mind for me from a younger age is I had an opportunity to take a trip to Zimbabwe. And I went with my mom. I was still in high school at the time. And one of my mom's best friends was originally from Zimbabwe. And we had previously done a fundraising project to raise funds for the first women's university in Africa, which is located in Zimbabwe. And as a high school student, thinking about continuing my education and kind of being in that space of applying for colleges later on, and thinking about what I was going to do with my life, it was just this very pivotal moment that I had an opportunity to go to Zimbabwe. We were in Africa for a month, which in and of itself, again, as a high school student, to be able to have a really immersive experience was really special. And we spent a lot of time looking at the university over there and seeing the projects and everything that they were doing. And because my mom had been friends with that group of women for a long time, I had seen kind of the progression, at least from afar, of how the university was coming to life. And so I knew the stories behind how it started just in the co-founders. They started it out of their homes, and then I'm seeing it a couple of years later, and they have this beautiful campus that I was just so impressed by. And that trip in so many ways planted seeds, I think, for me personally, wanting to pursue an entrepreneurial endeavor, especially as a woman, and also in the travel space. That was something that I felt very connected to as well. And there's actually an article, I came back and my school asked me to write a story about it in the school paper, which is also rooted to my love of storytelling and eventually ending it up with a degree in journalism. But at the time, it was just kind of experiencing these things as they were happening. And looking back, I still have that story, and it's really cool that I was talking about the economy. I was talking about entrepreneurship. I was talking about taking the time to listen to others before speaking up yourself. So there's these cool pieces of that trip that when I reread that article years later, I'm like, wow, that actually, even though I was 16 years old, there was all of these things that are still deeply tied to what my passions and interests are today.
And Kim, you had a life-changing experience also in Zimbabwe, since we're talking about Zimbabwe. So I'm thinking, you picked that place, and do you want to remind us of that story?
Sure. Well, as an Israeli, one of the first things that you do once you finish your IDF service is you want to leave the country and go traveling. And I decided to do something a little bit unique and go to Africa, which if you know Israelis, you know that most of them are going to South America and or India. And I wanted to volunteer. While I was there volunteering, I got to know the different, I wouldn't say sides, but maybe the different narratives in Zimbabwe as a country that knew a lot of hurt between the races, and I got to start thinking about my own home and my conflict zone while I was speaking to others on their own troubles. And it definitely changed my views. Coming back home changed my way of thinking and the way that I understood travel. and the way that I understood the Israeli and Palestinian conflict, I definitely came back thinking I need to talk to these people and I need to better understand how the conversation can work. Definitely life-changing experience for me, and it always fascinates me how travel brings out stories, and a lot of people write. A lot of people find themselves writing while they're traveling, and I don't know if I ever sat down and read everything I wrote, but it's definitely helpful. Kelly, can you tell us a bit about Impact Travel Alliance? What it is that you're doing there?
Yes. So Impact Travel Alliance is a global community and nonprofit. Our vision is to improve the world through travel. And so we do that through education and advocacy efforts around sustainable tourism, and essentially just helping travelers understand how they can explore in a way that has a positive impact on local communities and protects our environment, no matter what their travel style is, whatever the budget is, whatever the destination is, just really taking those themes around sustainability and applying it to all types of travel.
Can you tell us a bit more about sustainability? I mean, I know that it's you can talk about sustainability in urban spaces, architecture, food. Do you specify in one point, or you're trying to focus on the different ways?
So I always try to just distill it into its simplest definition, especially if you're new to the space. I think there's all of these different nuances to it that can be a little bit overwhelming. And so I always just try to say that sustainable travel is travel that has a positive impact on a local community, the environment, and the economy. And as long as you remember those three bottom lines of like, these are the core values of what sustainability looks like, then it becomes easier to apply it to different types of travel. So again, whether you're in an urban setting or out in the middle of nowhere, or whatever your budget looks like, there's all of these different ways that you can apply it. And thinking about it as a broader umbrella definition, for me, is the easiest way to begin applying it to all types of experiences. And then as you learn more about it and continue to dig deeper, and again, looking for the best story for me, then you learn all of these other things along the way that you're able to pick up and apply to everything from the ticket that you're booking down to the souvenir that you buy.
How can travelers really get to know what organization, what company, who's really responsible or not? And I know when we work with partners, we start looking, even as somebody who's like very versed into it, it's very hard. It's not easy. So one thing I realized, for example, just because somebody puts "We are responsible travel company" on their website means nothing, absolutely nothing. And actually sometimes those who advertise it more are the ones doing it less, and those who advertise it less are the ones who are doing it naturally more. I mean, some of the local operators in areas I've traveled to, whether in Colombia or in Costa Rica, are doing amazing work on the ground. But if you go to their website, that's not what they're advertising, because it's just their way of life. And yet some big companies sometimes have social responsibility over their websites, and sometimes they not. So how do I, as a traveler, really can distinguish who's responsible or not? What questions should I ask to figure that out?
I will try to answer that as concisely as possible. I'm sorry. It's all good. So we're actually, later today, we are hosting an event that will, through ITA, that's online as well. So we'll do a 1-hour deep dive on this. But as a preview for the general overview, it's not easy. And one of the reasons for that is because travel and tourism is so big. It represents 10% of the world's GDP. And it's different in every destination. It's different for every company. Yes, you have these core ideas and these core values, but even if you start to think about that small mom and pop company that can move quickly and they can make everything incredibly sustainable, just because they don't have a huge corporation with all of these different offices and all of these different players who are involved. And so it's much easier for a smaller company to have more sustainable initiatives because they can move quickly. On the flip side of that, for example, if you're a small boutique hotel, say you only have 34 rooms, then that's only 34 opportunities per night to make an impact through the efforts that you're doing. And not to discount that, because that's very important, but you also have to have the corporations do good. And so that is complicated, but can also be scaled quickly once you have buy-in from all of the stakeholders. And if you think about a decision that could be very small for a 34-room boutique hotel, such as removing plastic straws, then if you do that on scale with a corporation, Marriott got rid of plastic straws a couple of years ago, for example, and that one little action has a huge impact very quickly. And so it's a little bit of a balancing act there. And this is why it's complicated as well. Even thinking about, should you be traveling in the first place? Should you be getting on a plane when we know that the climate crisis is very real? You have those decisions that you have to make as well. So that's kind of thinking about the scope of the industry and what the space looks like and why it's nuanced. And that's, again, why I go back to trying to find a simple definition for sustainability, and then you can begin to apply it on a case-by-case basis. There's a lot to unpack there. So I guess going back to your question, Aziz, thinking about greenwashing, and if you have a huge corporation that, for example, says, we're not washing your towels if you hang them up because we want to protect the environment. On one hand, like, yes, that's great if you're doing that actually in an environmental effort. But on the other hand, if you're doing that just to save money, which hotels are when they don't wash your towels, that is not as eco-friendly as you would imagine it to be. And so that corporation also has to back that up with saying, yes, we're not washing your towels, but look, we're also doing these other things. We're solar powered, or we're doing these other things like thinking about food systems and how to mitigate your environmental impact through things like that. So it's a lot to break down and unpack in a short amount of time, but hopefully that adds a little bit of light to the complexities of this. And as travelers, I think that the most important thing that you can do is get really curious, ask a lot of questions, familiarize yourself with what sustainability looks like. And that's everything from paying your employees fairly down to thinking about your environmental impact, and then asking of that from the travel companies, requesting it when they don't have it, and then sharing that on social media as well and spreading the message.
Thanks. It actually brings a question to mind to Aziz. When you founded Majdi and when you started taking tours, did you know these concepts? I mean, did you hear these terms before, sustainable travel and responsible travel? And were you building off of them, or were you building a company and then later understanding that you're doing this off the top of your mind?
Yeah. First, I just want to say that Lorraine, I think Kelley already answered that question about the examples of the travel that you were asking. And yes and no. I definitely knew we want to build a responsible travel company. The whole idea of Majdi was to be responsible, was to build something that actually can embody in it not only travel for the kick of it, but travel as an educational experience, as an exchange, However, with time, I learned more about responsible travel, and we learned a lot more about how to be. There's always the next step of what you can do, always. And every time we get to the next step, we figure out, oh, there's a next one, and now how do we get there? So we focused in the beginning on the exchange and on people, and we focused on fair wages, like you mentioned, and then we got more into how do we become more environmentally sound company, which is not, when we started, it was not a question we focused on much, because we were much more focused on the human element. And so slowly we are learning more and more how to be more and more and more responsible. We also learned that we need somebody else to audit us. We can't claim to be responsible. And so at some point we ended up going to B Corp, which is an association that audits responsible companies, not only travel, and ask them to audit our business, financial. They go through your finances, they go through your claims, they go through your staff, go through your salaries, and make sure you really do what you claim. And I think that's really important, that you're not just, going like, I'm a responsible company, when nobody else really has access to see, do you pay even taxes or not? Are you in a safe haven somewhere, which many companies are. So we have to ask a lot more questions, as Kelley said earlier.
And certification programs, it levels the playing field, where then as a consumer, you're able to go and say, great, I recognize B Corp. I know that they have values that align with my own, and they're fact checking it. And so as a traveler, certification systems like that help you to book something in confidence that you're having a positive impact. The flip side of that, though, is that there's certification programs that are not legit as well. And so it's a complicated thing.
Right, just because there's a certification of an association that doesn't really, that you can, I think we talked about this before. There are some certifications where you pay for, but nobody checks you. And so you have to be aware and check what are the requirements to get that certification. And I remember when I went to Vietnam, I went to this old family house. It was so amazing experience. One of my favorite experiences probably from all my travels, and spent time with this couple who were in their 90s, and just, they were so welcoming. And at some point it hit me, I wasn't traveling with Majdi, I was traveling with a local tour operator. That's before we started our work there. And I asked the guide, how much do you pay that family for hosting us? And he said, oh, we pay them well, don't worry. And I said, I was just wondering how much. And he said, we pay them $1 for each guest. I said, dude, we spent so much time. We had tea in their house. $1 seems a little low considering how much I've paid you. So why do they get only $1? Oh, I think it's enough. That's what the company decided. So I asked them if there's a way to give more money and still be respectful. And fortunately, it was a Tet holiday then, and you actually supposed to give a gift that is money in that holiday. So it just worked perfectly for that day, and we were able to leave a little bit more. And I think that's the consciousness of the traveler is really important. And in your work with ITA, how do you get travelers to think about these things? What kind of activities you do to get them to really think critically about their travels and how they impacting the families and the locals they are interacting with?
I think even going back to a little bit of what you were saying before, as a company with Majdi, you started off with this focus on the societal issues and social justice and building connections. And from there, you continued to learn more, and eventually that led into environmentalism as well. And it's the same for business as it is for an individual. Sustainability is a journey. And the more you learn, and I think this is what's really beautiful about it, the more that you learn about it, the more that you want to learn. And so it's like, for me, the easiest way to start is to pick a cause, pick something that you care about, that you're passionate about. There's ways that you can have an impact on that cause, from everything down to the clothes that you wear, the food that you eat, the people that you talk to, the books that you read. There's all of these different ways that you can have a significant impact and improve the world for that cause. And as you dig deeper into that, then your eyes are opened to how you can continue down that path, or focus on something else, or realize that those two things are even interconnected in and of themselves. Environmentalism is so deeply connected to increasing representation in the travel industry. And so there's these deep ideas that you start to be able to unpack as you take these little steps, just because you're interested in having a better travel experience. And I think that's what's really exciting about what we're doing at ITA is we're just giving travelers tools to think about the world a little bit differently, whether that's saying, here's how you empower women, or here's how you conserve oceans, or whatever that big picture cause is. There's all of these little tips and tricks that you can do. And those little things start to become habit over time. And then they also start to turn into waves that create this greater action at the same time. So I think, like, ultimately, it's just taking that first step. And I know you talk about that a lot, Aziz, as well. It's that first step that can often be the hardest, but then after that, it's so addicting.
Can we connect to where the world is at today? I mean, I know that not many people are thinking about international travel tomorrow morning. What can we do today while we're traveling, I guess, in our car or in our city, to still be conscious and about sustainable travel?
I always say that sustainability is a lifestyle, and it starts at home. If you are trying to only have a sustainable lifestyle when you're traveling, that's going to be near to impossible if you're in a foreign destination, because you're taking yourself out of your comfort zone, and you're trying to figure out everything all at once, as opposed to starting at home, starting today. Again, thinking about all of those little things that you can do. Personally, I really like thinking about it through the lens of food, and thinking about, what are we eating? Why are we eating it? Where does it come from? On average, your food travels 1,500 miles to get to your plate. And so that in and of itself, if you can just say, I want to eat things that are more local, that's going to cut down on your environmental impact on the world. Thinking about it through that lens as well, if you apply that local mindset or that seasonal mindset to where you're getting your food, it's going to be fresher, it's going to be better for you, it's going to taste better, and it's also going to be unique to that destination. And so the food that you're eating wherever you are, if you're picking something that's just locally sourced, then when you go abroad somewhere and you're like, great, I want to try something that's really, really local to this area, you're still in that mindset of having a smaller carbon footprint and an environmental impact. And at the same time, that then opens your eyes to saying, great, what cultural traditions are here? What are local recipes? How can I connect with people through food? And so again, it's all connected, and the more that you learn it and the more that you practice it, the more that you realize that there's all of these different opportunities around you with every little thing that you do.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. We think about travel as when we go far away, but the truth is, if we don't apply the principles when we are home and to our own neighborhood and to our own city, there's no chance we're going to apply it when we are farther, because it's much more difficult. So I'm 100% with you on that. Considering what's happening in the US today and issues that we are talking about, issues of justice, issues of equality and inequality and societal problems. What's the role of travel that you see that can address those issues? And how can a traveler be, in some ways, an ambassador or a peacemaker, somebody who's dealing or having to be aware of those societal issues?
First of all, I want to even recognize that I carry a US passport. I am blonde, I'm white. There's a lot of privilege that goes along with that, and even me being able to build out my own entrepreneurial career. And my hope with ITA is that we can use that as a platform to help to amplify other voices that are out there and are so not only needed within the industry, but the mainstream is tired. It's mediocre. It's top 10 lists where generic travel, and it's 2020 and we can do better. Like as an industry, as individuals on so many different levels. And the industry really needs to step up. It's a problem when you go to travel conferences and you see not only the same speakers all the time, but you also see a bunch of old white men, and like every single conference is like that. If you Google traveler, you see a bunch of white couples gazing out into the distance. And again, like that's so boring. And that doesn't even touch upon some of these like deeply problematic issues that are occurring just because of a lack of representation. And so again, like that's like surface level for what's happening. But the first step is representation. The first step is seeking out those other stories and seeking out other voices, especially from someone who doesn't look like yourself, and listening to them and learning more about them. And I feel like these are so many themes of like storytelling and taking the first step, but that's ultimately, I think that there's a lot of smaller projects within the industry that are doing a good job or an okay job, but as a whole, the travel industry really, really needs to step up and do better.
I'll just say that the photos that we were showing before, they're all pictures that you took, right? You're a photographer yourself, and I wanted to ask if there are any specific of the pictures that we have that you can kind of tell us a bit more of the background story about the pictures. We were talking earlier about how, as a photographer, you don't know what to choose first. Do I want to take that picture and have that memory for later, or do I want to just take in the environment and have it with me right now?
Yeah, it's tough. I think I switched to shooting on film for a long time. These ones that you're showing right now are digital, but for a long time I started shooting on film because it made me much more intentional about what I was taking a photo of. It's so easy, especially with an iPhone. You pick up your phone and you just snap, snap, snap. And it's important to, again, whether in your day-to-day life or when you are traveling somewhere, to put down the screen, focus on what's around you. This moment was incredible. This is in Colombia, in the Amazon, and that's a pink dolphin. And we had been out on a boat all day looking for these river dolphins. And we kept seeing them very, very far away, but just little glimpses of them popping up. And as we're leaving and we're going back to where we were staying, the sun's setting and it's gorgeous, and picked up my camera and was snapping this photo. And then all of a sudden these dolphins started hopping across the water. And so that was a magical experience. They also, the dolphins stayed around long enough as well that we were able to take photos but then also be able to just look at them in real life. And that was incredible. And I think that's really special about any wildlife tourism experiences as well. You can't plan something like that. It's just this special moment that's just for you and whoever you're with.
Aziz, you're muted again.
I was gonna say we can go to the other. I just was wondering your alligator or crocodile, I don't know what it is, photo. Where was it taken?
These are all Colombia.
Colombia. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And that is it's in the Amazon. You fly. I flew from Bogota to Leticia, and that's another just sustainable travel tip in and of itself, to go somewhere that's a little bit more off the beaten path, and support other local communities that are often bypassed from major cities, and you're able to support them with your tourism dollars.
Awesome. Can we stay on the photography maybe? And while we're doing that, we can see if anybody else has questions. Please send us your questions, but maybe we can go through a few more. Is this also Colombia?
This is Nepal, other side of the world. I love Nepal. I have been 3 times. This is with a program called Community Homestay. And what they do, you're able to connect with women. It's a women-led initiative where you stay in someone's home, and you're able to live side by side with them and get to know more about their lives and their culture. And typically I've done it on 2 trips in several different cities, but typically you have several generations who are living together in one household. So this is actually right in their like kitchen, living room area. And I was able to talk to the daughter, talk to the mother, talk to the grandmother. There's another picture that we made the food together as well. And so that's just, again, it's a cool way to connect with someone else by through food, by living with them side by side, and really just get an immersive experience for that destination.
Seeing how people transform after staying, even having a dinner with a family, but even staying over for a night. One of the most meaningful experiences for me was taking a Jewish congregation to stay in a Palestinian refugee camp in Bethlehem. And even though some people were terrified about it and, oh, how is this gonna work? They stayed for 2 nights. And when I picked them up, both sides were crying. And I normally joke that it's the only time I've seen Palestinians cry that, Jews leaving their homes. Sorry. But it was such a meaningful experience. For both. For those Palestinians, it was their first meaningful experience with Jews. And for these Jewish Americans, it was their first ever real introduction to Palestinians' lives. And I talked to the rabbi after and I said, how was it? And he said, oh, it was fun. We had a great nightlife. I'm like, dude, there's no nightlife in refugee camps. What are you talking about? It's like, oh, I went out with the boys and we sat out, smoked some water pipe and drank coffee. And they asked me some help. They said, as a rabbi, you need to answer some questions. And I'm like, oh, here we go. They're going to start talking about like politics. It's like, then they said, so how do I meet a girl? And they're like 16-year-old boys. They're like, what's the right way to start with a girl I like? And it's like, it ended up being questions that a 16-year-old kid in the States would ask. And it's just changed so much perceptions. That was amazing. So homestays are absolutely the best.
I agree. What's cool about that, if you go back to the Nepal one for 2 seconds, back one more maybe, if not, there's a picture of a woman somewhere in here. It's run by not just one individual, it's a network of women across Nepal. That is Thailand now. But so this network of women, you end up having the entire community who's involved. So there's another shot in here or on one of my trips, I asked this woman if I could take a photo of her, and I took a picture. And then on the next trip that I went, I get to my homestay, and then out walks this grandmother who's the woman that I took a photo of. And I was just like, how did this just happen? Like, I have a photo of you. Let me pull open my computer. And yes, this is her on the left. And so she happened to be someone who was in the street who I passed by, and I waved and was asked if I could take her photo. And then a year later, I was like, oh my gosh, I have a photo of you and I'm staying in your house.
Wow. Wow. All right, should we go through more? Shannon, can you move to the next slides, maybe? Thank you. Ooh, that's nice and cold.
This is Norway. And I went there in January of 2019. This was actually on an Impact Travel Alliance trip that we did with members of our media network and the Norway Tourism Board. And I was connected with the Norway Tourism Board, and I met them, and I got really excited to tell them about this community-based tourism project called Visit Natives, where you're able to visit in Norway, you visit a indigenous community of Sami reindeer herders. And basically I was like, this has been on my bucket list. I really want to do this. This is the family who we stayed with there. And as a crazy person, convinced the tourism board that I wanted to go to Norway, northern Norway, to the Arctic tundra in January, and then convinced a group of other people to come with me. But it was absolutely phenomenal. They have such a beautiful way of living in harmony with the land around them, and I think the knee-jerk reaction is to look at the Arctic tundra, and a lot of people just see cold and a wasteland. And the Sami community has more than 100 words for snow. They just have this very rich and deep connection with snow, and it's important to them. And being able to live side by side with them and learn more about that and the significance of that was incredible. I could go on forever. There's so many beautiful stories that were from that. And even just thinking about what we take for granted or what we do on a day-to-day basis. The sun rose for the first time in 3 months when we were there because of the positioning. And so being able to see the sunrise for the first time, and then to see their faces when they're like, oh yes, like that little thing that's popping up there, like that's the first time that we've seen that in 3 months. And so it's just, that goes back to the magic of travel as well.
Sounds like a bizarre experience, and you're helping us build our own bucket list for once it becomes safe to travel again. I did want you to talk about these pictures, and I think after that we'll try to wrap up.
So this is in Thailand. That tattoo on the right is a Sakeon Tattoo. I got that through a company called Wear Sidewalks, and that's what they specialize in, ethical experiences to be able to get these tattoos. And what it is, if you haven't heard of it, it is a blessing from a Buddhist monk. And instead of a traditional in the sense that we think of tattoos, instead of the traditional concept where you would say, I want this and I want it here, and you would go and you would find an artist and you would say, please draw this for me, this is what I want. Instead of that, you go and you meet a Buddhist monk and you say, these are my hopes and my dreams and my fears. And you're telling all of that to a stranger. And as you talk to him, he starts sketching out some things. And by sketching, I very much more of like a doodle, at least my experience was. And each little individual part on it has a specific translation but also a translation that is made just for you as an individual. And everything from what's on it down to where it's placed has a very intentional meaning. And so you go through this, and he explains on this piece of paper what each point means, and then is basically like, "Are you ready?" and then you get a tattoo, and it's like a hand poke tattoo, and that tradition is very culturally significant. I very much wanted one, but I wanted one to be done in a way that was respectful of those traditions as well. And being able to have an experience like that it's absolutely, that's my hands down my favorite souvenir that I have. And it was an incredible experience.
That's amazing. Well, we got one more question. I know we said we'll wrap, but we got one more question that I think is important. And it's from Nicole, and she says, how do you maintain authenticity in local community experiences like homestays and home visits? Because I've seen incredible experiences turn commercialized. And I agree that does happen. So I wonder what your thoughts about that, Kelley.
I always make sure that it is a locally requested project. It's never about going in and being an observer of a destination. You're living side by side with them, and to be able to go somewhere in the first place is a privilege in and of itself. And so you are the guest in that person's home and also just their destination as a whole. And so I'm huge on seeking out locally run and operated experiences. It could be from a bigger company that goes to multiple destinations, but just ensuring that they're working with local partners as well is a huge thing when you're booking the experience from the first place. And having it be locally run and operated is a big deal. Having it make sure it's done in a way that respects their local cultures and traditions, making sure that they're paid fairly. Those are all questions that you can ask before booking. And then once you're there, remembering that you are a guest in their home, whether you're physically in their home or you're just in that destination as well. And those are habits that you need to keep in mind, from everything from what you're wearing down to thinking about what your actions are. So don't just go in and you would probably be offended if someone came up and just took a picture of you without asking. And so having the same sort of respect for someone when you're in their home, even if you don't speak their language, which sometimes happens, just waving, picking up your camera and pointing to it, that is enough to be able to ask for permission when you're taking a photo. So there's all of those little tips along the way. And if you're booking with a good company, they'll also be able to guide you through that. They'll say, this is what tipping looks like traditionally, this is what's respectful, because sometimes tipping isn't respectful in other destinations. And having someone who's able to really guide you through that is really crucial. So that from the get-go really stems from, I don't like to say doing your research. I like to think of it as more as getting really curious about who you're booking with and making sure that you're booking with someone who has that acute attention to detail.
And I can add from a business point of view, for example, we use a lot of families for lunches, for dinners, for homestays. And one of the things that helps us is almost all of them, actually, to my knowledge, all of them, nobody has quit their day life and day job and day whatever to just do this full time. So for example, we use a family in the old city in Jerusalem for some of our lunches. The husband is a teacher, and he's still a teacher, and they won't do it every day. They will not do it every event. Now, some people make it their job, but then it's a bit different, and you have to present it a bit different, that this person, their job is to host people and do conversations with them, and this is their income. But most people I've worked with, it's a side thing. They'll welcome one group a week, maybe for a dinner or for a night, but they're not gonna do it every day because they want to also take care of their kids. They're like, I don't want my kids every night to be hanging with different people. That just doesn't seem right. And so it depends. And for us as a company, we prefer to work with the people who do it as a side thing. It helps complement their income. It helps them for their kids to learn English because they get to talk to these travelers. So they see it as an add-on rather than as an intrusion to their community. And
I think like to translate that to maybe what a traveler can ask is just asking those questions. Is it their full-time job? Is it a part-time job? How are they getting paid? How much are they getting paid? And those start to peel away the layers at understanding if it's the right experience to be going on. Again, thinking about it for both yourself and the local. And to me, I always pull that back and say it's going to be a win-win. If it's a sustainable travel experience, it's going to be better for you as the traveler because you're going to have an immersive, deep, rich experience somewhere where you're able to connect deeply with that local destination. And then it's also going to be better for the local at the same time.
Talking about pictures, I think we'll take a look at our winner from our photo competition last week. We had black and white, and we found this picture to be beautiful because it really tells a story. And I mean, it's not that, perfect picture, although it is in a way. So that's why we liked it. And thank you so much, Patrick, for submitting. You'll be receiving a copy of Aziz's Crossing Boundaries book, A Traveler's Guide to World Peace. And for next week, we're asking you to send over a picture that tells us a story, 1,000 words in a picture. Aziz, do you want to tell us a bit about what we're seeing here in this example?
I thought this fits because of the topic, what we talked about, responsible travel. This is from Bali, and this is a Hindu community that do the story of Prince Rama. But instead of you go to a stage and a theater and all of that, this is the people who are in the temple, the village. They decided to do it just outside the temple. You sit on plastic chairs. Every person from the village, one person from every house in the village joined to do it. It doesn't happen every day. It's once every either week or every month. I don't remember. And I was lucky to be there at that time. And the story is the story of Prince Rama fighting against the evil king. And it's, to me, it was one of the most memorable experiences. I understood nothing words-wise because it wasn't in English, but it just was authentic. It's the same way they do it in the temple and not something that's made for me as a traveler, as a tourist, that's watered down. It was a real experience, and I appreciated that. And the money goes to support their temple.
It's a great picture. So submit your pictures by Wednesday, the 24th, and you can win Aziz's book. For next week, we're going to be hosting Creativity for Peace. It will be interesting. We'll have a few different people join us so we can hear a bit about what they do as an organization and a bit from experiences on the ground on their programs. So join us again next week.
Leaders, which I think is something terribly needed in the world, and the organization works with the future female leaders of especially Israel, Palestine, I think some in the US. So we'll hear from future or current female leaders.
And we'll say thank you again to Kelley that you joined us today. We hope that it does kind of switch a little something in all of our listeners' minds when they're thinking about their next travel and even about their day-to-day life, because we said that it starts at home. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
like to always finish with it's not where you travel, it's how.
Thank you, everyone. Join us again next week.